Hello and welcome to Geek Weekly, your audio newsletter for everything Geek Speak. Here we talk about movies, television, video games, and so much more. Your co-hosts today are Rob Coughlan and Jeremy Mullet. My name is Chad Morris. Let's geek out. So this week at Geek Weekly, we are going to be talking about E3. The conference actually happened last week. Unfortunately, we're a little bit late to the game, and that's because of what, Rob? What made us not be able to make this podcast happen a little sooner?
Laziness?
No, not laziness. We had a bachelor party to go to. Whose bachelor party was it?
My bachelor party. No, your bachelor party.
Yes, it was mine. Jesus Christ, Rob. You ruin everything.
I do ruin everything.
Yes, no. And
sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. Hashtag. Wait, no,
yes.
That's before. Hashtag. Sorry, not sorry. There we go.
There you go.
I speak the lingo. I'm 27. I'm young. I'm hip. Here we go.
We're cool with it.
Yeah, I'm old enough to have kids. Isn't that crazy? I don't have kids, but I'm just saying I'm old enough to have some and be that embarrassing dad. And they'll be like, Dad, come on, stop using LOL. That's so 2000s.
Jesus, stop.
Just like, stop it. What the hell is AIM? I don't even know what that is. AIM? I don't get it.
Who says ROTFL then?
Ruffle. LMAO.
JK.
Rolling. Whoa. Mind blown. Anyways,
so yeah, North Conway.
North Conway. That's where we went for my bachelor party, which North Conway is in New Hampshire, which is very close to where everybody lives. It's basically, connecting Maine and Massachusetts. I live in Maine right now, but all of my friends and family live in Massachusetts, so it was quite of a nice way for everybody to be able to kind of meet in the middle and be like, yo, let's have some fun. And we did lots of different stuff. We went hiking, we went tubing down a river, we went tubing down in, a ski slope with water. I don't know, it was kind of, what is that, like a tubing water slide, but not really. It's basically a really large slip and slide that you go to, tubing down. That was kind of cool.
Yes, that is exactly what that was supposed to be, though it wasn't. It's interesting because they actually had to wax the bottom of the tube before you could go down it, though they actually had sprinkler heads scattered throughout the entire slope to keep the surface semi-wet so you could actually coast down this very rubbery, padded, protected tube enclosure. I don't know how you explain that, but yeah, it is a very large slip and slide because you are literally going downhill.
Yeah, no, it was pretty cool. It was actually right next to the place where I went tubing the last time I went to not the last time, but one of the last times I went to North Conway. I went in the winter with a couple of people. Brendan was one of those people who actually got to go to the bachelor weekend. He's one of my best men. He went tubing, and I actually saw the slip and slide like structure where we were, and I was like, what is that? I could not figure it out, and it wasn't until I came in the summer that I realized that it was basically the summer version of going tubing. And you don't really get that wet, though, because, there is, a lot of water that sprays on you, but by the time you get down, you're basically dry because of all the wind and how fast you're going. It was really fun, though.
It really was more than a mist than it was a spray.
It was okay, if we're going to say that, it's a heavy mist. That's what I'm going to say. Heavy mist.
Heavy mist.
Okay, so let's go on to what we're talking about. Again, we're talking about E3. That happened last week. We have so many things to talk about here. So let me start off. PlayStation actually announced their own virtual reality / VR system that's going to be coming out sometime this year. What time is that again? August?
No, October 13th is when they anticipate on releasing it.
October. And not only is the VR coming out, but 50 launch titles. Now, that is a huge amount of launch titles, but I do have a theory about that, which we will get on later. Now, this VR is going to cost about $400. That's on top of what you're already paying for the PlayStation 4 itself, which it sounds a little crazy, but honestly, you are basically getting a second console that actually works with the original console that you have. So honestly, it's not that crazy. $400 does seem like it would be worth it considering it. Now, what is the one that Brendan has? What is it called again?
The HTC Vive.
Yes, the Vive, which I think was made by Steam. Isn't that correct?
Correct. It is powered by Steam.
Right, and Steam is a PC program that you can use, on your computer. And for me, the Vive I got to try that the other day. It was incredible. You got to walk around this kind of small place. You don't get that much place to walk around, but just enough that you feel safe that you're not going to walk into a wall or anything like that. But it uses quite a lot. From what I can see about the PlayStation is that it doesn't use the cameras. It doesn't seem like you can walk around. It just seems like you sit down and you look back and forth and you have whatever controller you're using in your hand to make you be able to interact with what's going on in the video game. But I do have to say that I think it's very, very cool that a popular console is coming out with a VR. I'm very, very excited about that.
Yeah, interesting to see that they're using old technology with their new technology, because I can see those old familiar rubber ball, color-coded rubber balls that you used on the PlayStation 3 when they had their PlayStation Move system, when the couple of title games that came out that incorporated that.
Right, exactly. Now, the only problem is with this being the first VR being announced for the consoles, I'm scared that it's going to be just thrown together. Now, if you remember when Nintendo came out with their own motion controllers, PlayStation came out with their own not much longer after, and it did not do well. I don't even think they had enough games. I don't really know exactly what happened. I did not have a PlayStation at that point, but it didn't seem like it lasted very long. And another thing I can say is that Xbox came out with not a motion controller, but, motion control with just using your body, which actually did work out very well. That novelty did go away. I don't think VR is going to have that happen. I really don't. I think VR is actually going to stay a while. It seems like they did like the semi-virtual reality by being able to use your body to be the controller. They did that with the Wii, they did that with the PlayStation, and they did that with the Xbox, being able to use your body to move around and play certain games. That novelty really diminished in the last couple of years, and now they don't even really use that stuff. Like, Xbox doesn't come out with any Kinect video games anymore, and that is because the novelty ran out. They just want to be able to sit down and play with a controller. But I don't think that's going to happen with VR. What do you think?
I'm just going to point out the major elephant in the room and just say all of this VR stuff is just a segue to the eventuality that life is going to be like the Matrix sometime in the future. You're just going to plug something in that's going to hook up to your neuro paths in your brain, and you're just going to legit play out this game in your head without any other additional equipment.
No, I'm not sure if that's completely true, but what I can say is, though, that the future is definitely coming. I mean, and it has been coming for years. I mean, we started off with, I think the first thing that really showed us, oh my gosh, we're in the future, is the iPod. I think that was the first thing that came out that people were like, oh my gosh, things are happening. Shit just got real. Here we go. And one thing that they just finally announced is that you can now have a car drive you places while you sit in the driver's seat and not have to do anything. I was talking to my mother-in-law about that this morning, and I said, look, this technology has been around for years. I actually watched a video of a car that was made by Google that had a blind person sitting in the front seat, and it drove them to a Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru, and they got coffee. And that was quite a few years ago. Of course, this stuff has been here a long, long time, but they're also trying to prevent too fast a progression when it comes to technology. There's quite a few reasons for that, and one of the other things is that, having automatic driving cars is absolutely crazy, to the point where there's going to be a lot of laws that are going to be created with this kind of thing. I can't believe that it actually even taking longer for cars to be able to do this, because it seems like with this new technology, it's going to change the world, and that it wouldn't even take longer for this to be legal to put on the streets.
Yeah, it's really interesting whether or not these automobiles are going to use some sort of magnetic, I don't know, sort of guided rail, based system where there's just I don't understand how it's going to work. Honestly, with the whole Google thing, I get it because they probably just sync up the car to GPS in some way, shape, or form and use Google Maps to help it steer itself left, right, and whichever. But how is it going to be able to factor in for like red lights? Is that all going to be just automated where it just knows it has to stop and there's just no middle ground to it? How's it going to account for somebody randomly walking out into the road? It's a scary but yet interesting technology, and I'm very eager to see what's going to happen in the next few years because it seems like there's a lot of manufacturers trying to make a push.
Yep, and VR is definitely one of those things. Now, I can tell you right now is that our houses are especially not built for VR. Brendan got the Vive not that long ago, and he set it up in his computer room, which is the basement of his house. And when I came over, I can't tell you how many times I hit poles that were, sticking out from, wherever they were inside his thing. And I was walking into his computer desk and smacking the ceiling and all that kind of stuff because his ceiling was pretty short. And yet there was really no other place for him to put that. And I actually felt the same way when the Kinect came out. When I got the Kinect, I did not have a good place to put that. Luckily, I have a nice big living room if I ever wanted to use the Kinect, although no one uses the Kinect anymore because, again, as I said before, it's just a nothing anymore, so it doesn't really matter. But as I said, there's a lot of planning that has to go out with using this stuff so then everybody can use it. Right now, from what I could see from the Vive, is that you need to have a very specific setup and actually even probably have to change rooms around in order to use virtual reality, especially if you're going to be walking around, which again, I don't know if PlayStation has that kind of capability or if it's just using your head and your hands.
So I think in my perspective, where the PS4 VR is going to fall short compared to the Vive is going to be the range of motion. As you said, with the Vive, what I get is it's not based on any type of a camera. It is just motion and movement sensory. With the PlayStation VR, this is exactly going to be like what the old PlayStation Move system was like before the VR aspect came into play, where it's just going to track the motion based on the light coming from off of the ball controllers that you're holding in your hands. And I would feel that probably the VR is only going to be more of a periphery. You can look to your left, you can look to your right, above, below, but really not walking around, probably not going to be doing a whole lot of movement. You're most likely going to be moving the character using the standard controllers, pressing up, down, left, right to move in one direction or the other. So
we could definitely be wrong on that because the way that it worked on the Vive was very different. Yes, you got to walk a couple of steps back or frontward or to the side or to the other side. But there was a way for you to explore further of the map than just taking a couple of steps left, right, up, down. And it was very interesting, and I don't want to give that away because I don't know if PlayStation will do that. Honestly, you just have to go and try it yourself. So moving on, and not really even moving on, I just want to talk about one of the games that was announced for PlayStation VR. And Rob, you might know that we had talked about this earlier. It is the Batman Arkham VR.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for that. The game looks absolutely incredible, and I'm just so ecstatic to know that the Mark Hamill is reprising his role once again as the role of the Joker, because as far as video games and animated series are concerned, when you think of the Joker, like Mark Hamill is synonymous with that, just like Heath Ledger or Jack Nicholson, say, for example, were sort of synonymous with the movies. He's basically established himself as the person to go to when it comes to playing the voice of the Joker.
Right, and he has retired. I think this is his third time that he's retired from the Joker, so it's nice to see that he's one of those people that probably will never retire from being the Joker. And I'm not upset about that in any way, shape, or form. And what's funny though is that not even just talking about Mark Hamill, but Rocksteady, which is the creators of Arkham Asylum and going on to Arkham Knight, excluding Arkham Origins, they were the ones that made the Arkham games, and they said after Arkham Knight that they were done. They were doing a trilogy, they were going to move on. And from what I heard is that they're going to be doing maybe some more DC-based games, but no more Batman games. But we were fortunate to get this game out of them. Now, one of the downsides is that this game is only 60 minutes long.
Yeah, that just seems so short for a game.
And it makes me wonder if a lot of the other VR games are going to be that short. I mean, because considering that there's 50 launch titles coming out, if there are 50 games and they're only 30 to 60 minutes long, then it makes a lot more sense. But if this is one of the only real shorter version ones, and then the rest of them are full-length games, then I'm surprised. Now, I feel like some of them are either going to be 60-minute games, or they're going to be very much like what you get with the Wii. Now, if you remember, one of the launch titles for the Wii is Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. These are little mini games that you can play in order to really understand what their new technology can give you. You know, whether it's playing the Wii Bowling or the Wii, baseball or, anything like that. It's a way for people to really get to know the new technology that they're coming out with that console. And the Valve, and I'm sorry, I forgot it again. Not Vive. And the Vive did the same thing. It came out with something from Valve, and that is another reason why I keep getting that name confused, is that Valve made basically a whole game that has mini games in it, so you can actually really understand how to use VR and what kind of technologies and opportunities it has. And so that is my guess, is that a lot of them might have those kind of things where they're not really long, full-on games with like huge story modes. It's more just 50 smaller games. But again, I could be wrong on that. But going back to Batman Arkham VR, this is apparently going to start off with Nightwing dying, which is very confusing because apparently this story takes place before Arkham Asylum, but in the last game that they just made, which is the last piece of the story in the original trilogy, Nightwing is alive. So is this a fake death, or are they taking a whole new spin on the story? But if that's the case, then why would they tell us that Arkham Asylum is after this specific story? So that's very confusing. Again, this is only for PlayStation, which sucks. This is the first Arkham game that's actually coming out for just one system. I wonder if that means that eventually, if Xbox comes out with their own VR, that maybe this will become a compatible game for them.
Yep, and that's actually a good segue because you did actually pinpoint one of the announcements that Microsoft made during their panel, that their Project Scorpio, as they're calling it right now, ultimately will incorporate some type of VR technology built into it. From what I read, there's really no major announcement. They don't have any major details. They didn't talk about any games, though I think they did name drop Fallout as being a potential playable VR title specifically.
That makes sense.
But they did mention that they might partner up with Oculus, which are currently going through some major renovations to the Oculus Rift system, and will be coming out with a new version called Oculus Touch, which is now going to have the similar type of hand controllers that the Vive offers, and is supposedly supposed to rival the HTC Vive specifically. But either way, it definitely looks like all cross platforms, maybe with the exception of Nintendo, just because they stand as a developer of their own. And sure, they are coming out with their own console, which they didn't get into too many details about at their press announcements. Theirs was mostly devoted towards The Legend of Zelda. But it seems like all major developers right now are definitely on the push towards VR as being the next frontier, so to speak, in gaming.
No, and I completely agree. So moving on from VR, but continuing with Batman, Batman does have another game that's going to be coming out very soon by Telltale. I don't know if you know what Telltale games are, but Batman is actually coming out with its own Telltale 5-episode series, which I'm very, very excited about. Telltale makes incredible interactive motion comic stories, and this way you actually get to be really part of the story and actually have an influence on how the story goes, which is something that's very, very interesting. There you get to choose what your character says, you get to choose what your character does, and this influences the story and gives it to a different outcome. And there's usually 3 to 5 episodes depending on what game it is. They've done Back to the Future, which was a great sequel. They've done Wallace and Gromit. They've done Jurassic Park, which had to do with the first movie. It was like a story that was going on during the first movie. And many, many more. Games of Thrones.
Walking Dead,
Minecraft. All these, so many different stories that you can do. But right now they're coming out with a game for Batman. Now, as far as I know, this has no connection to any other Batman story. It's their own take, but it actually takes place within maybe a year or so after he's become the Batman. So he's still very, very new to being the Batman. So in this story, the public is still not sure about him, which is something that's going to be really interesting to see him battling between trying to be good, but also getting a lot of hate from the public. And you're also going to see characters like Alfred Pennyworth, Harvey Dent, Vicky Vale, Selena Kyle, Lieutenant James Gordon, not Commissioner. It definitely is early on in the story. So, and those are the people that you're going to see in just episode 1. So, and that's going to be continuously getting bigger and bigger throughout every episode and getting more and more characters. So, that's only in the first episode. I'm very, very excited about that.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. I've seen a couple of the screenshots to it. Really curious to see how they craft the story for it, just knowing how well of a story they tell with a lot of their tales. Ha 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 ha.
Okay, are you ready to move on, or do you have more to say?
No, I really don't have much more to add in regards to, because I haven't personally read too much into it. When you first announced it the other day, it was sort of the first I had heard about it, so we can keep going.
So the next thing I have here is actually something that I think you're going to be very interested in. It is actually being able to play as Jason from Friday the 13th. This game has been announced this year, Friday the 13th, the video game. How do you feel about it, Rob?
Overjoyed, quite honestly, because the last game that we really had that had anything to do with Friday the 13th probably would have been the original NES game, which was pretty bad. It was the equivalent, let's put it this way. The Friday the 13th NES equivalent was like the ET for the Atari. It was not playable at all.
Right, and for me, I'm not big on Friday the 13th, but I was interested only because you and also Jeremy, who, again, he's still not recording with us yet, but he will be here soon, and I'm sure he's going to have something to say about this, and I'm sure he's going to be listening to this and being like, I have something to say, and he won't be able to do so. But luckily, we do have one person that is a Friday the 13th fan, and that would be you. But you actually get to play as Jason in this. Not actually a victim, but as Jason. And also, I guess, as a victim at points. Do you know how that works?
I don't. I believe it is... you may have the ability to personally change on the fly. It may not be something where you have to be Jason or you have to be the victim. It might be one of those aspects where you can change at any arbitrary point in time whenever you feel like it, because I had the sense when I watched the gameplay trailer that initially you started off with Jason. He was standing in the graveyard. He could hear the voice of his mother speaking to him, saying, find them, punish them, kill them. And off he goes, very brutal fashion, puts one poor girl's face through a brick wall, and then proceeds to go towards this additional cabin where there were 2 people inside. One he catches up with. You could spawn to the back door, which I think is really interesting in this weird cloud of smoke. You could sort of do this magician's act and go from the front door to the back door and catch somebody off guard and kill them as they're trying to make the escape through the back route. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing you see is this gentleman who's inside of the cabin who is holding himself captive, barring himself in. You see him make a run, but then he goes out onto a separate path, but then you can switch to him. And then there was this whole big chase where Jason is now chasing you. You have to get away from him, find refuge someplace else. But the only thing that kind of bothered me during that scene, and it's always going to be the case, you can't really escape it, unfortunately, no matter how good your graphics are, it just seemed like a little bit awkward because there was this exchange where Jason was trying to grab at this one particular character, but it wasn't really seamless. It seemed very jumpy, very jittery. Like he almost looked like he missed him, but then the next thing you know, he was grabbing him by the shirt and he was holding him up, and then he does some motion that makes him break free. And I get it. I mean, again, with the live game, it's difficult to make it seem very cinematic, but excited as I am for this game, it still seems like the graphics are almost sort of half-assed. And maybe this is just an alpha, or maybe it's a beta. I would probably say beta would probably be the better word for it. But there's a lot of weird environmental things that I take issue with. Like there's a way a door looks when it gets blown open, and then there's a way a door doesn't look when it gets blown open. And I'm specifically talking about that one scene in gameplay where you're playing as the victim. You turn the radio on in the back of the cabin to add as a distraction, but then you go hide under the bed, and next thing you know, you see Jason peeking in through the window outside, and then you see the door kind of like jostle a couple of times and then explodes into all these weird rectangular pieces of wood that are supposed to simulate a door, and it doesn't look realistic, you know? Wood splinters, it doesn't fraction apart in exact rectangular beams and posts, you know?
For me, it did look like it might be a little cheaply made, but at the same time, that's because, again, this is probably not like made by, you know, a huge gaming company. So it might just be that way, but fortunately, it doesn't always have to go with gameplay. It might have to just do with the story. The story might be really good. It might really go well with the franchise, and also just be reminiscent of watching those movies, and not only watching them, but now being able to interact with those movies and actually be a part of it. And that will be what either makes or breaks the game, because as we can see, it doesn't look like the mechanics is what's going to make it. It's going to be the story. And for me, I felt that it seemed a little boring to me, and also being able to play as the victim and also as Jason seemed a little off to me. I don't really understand how that's going to coincide together in the game. I don't really understand why you're playing as both, because how are you going to win the game if you can play as either one? But again, we don't know more than what we have just seen on the gameplay. It doesn't give us the story. It doesn't give us absolutely anything. So I think we'll know in due time.
Yeah, I mean, the cinematics seem pretty decent, but, you know, again, I'm even just kind of going back through and watching it as we're talking about it. And yeah, this definitely has to be a game that must be in very, very early design and concepts, because there's no way that somebody could pass off a game of that type of video quality with our next gen based systems, because it's just going to get laughed out of existence. So, and I really hope they don't do that, because Jason deserves a game in and of itself that people can finally say, at long last, you know, the Jason game we've been waiting for people who are really big into the whole Friday the 13th.
Right now, it's kind of in between being a good graphics current game and an indie game where they use like 3-bit. You know, you can't be anywhere in the middle, because you're gonna suffer through that. You know what I mean? There's a certain point on either you're gonna have really bad graphics and kind of make that as like an artist choice. Mm-hmm. You know, oh wow, you know, what was it, Meat Boy or something like that, or Meatball Boy or whatever they called it. That was an indie game that was all basically like 8-bit graphics and stuff like that, or even Minecraft. You know, right. That did really well, even though it's pretty darn current. It does really well. And that's because it was supposed to be that way. This game, because of how it looks like it's supposed to be a really good game, like graphics-wise, but it's just not up to par with most of the more up-to-date games that want to have really high graphics and want to look really realistic. So
exactly,
that's where it is. It's stuck between the middle right now, and you can't be in the middle. You're either really horrible graphics and people love the game, or you have really fantastic graphics and you love the game. But if you're in the middle, you're screwed. Doesn't matter how good the game is, to a certain extent.
The story really is going to have to carry this game, because it can't just be like what I almost sort of initially get the feel like isn't, and I don't know if you played it, but it's almost like Jaws Unleashed. If you ever saw that game, it was just, hey, here's the excitement of being able to play as Jaws, kill a dolphin, kill a whale, kill unsuspecting people at the beach. I hope, to God's sakes, it's not going to be anything hokey like that game was, because for what it was worth, the ooh-ah factor of playing as Jaws can't be the only draw to the game. Just like with Friday the 13th, it can't just be the draw of playing as Jason. Yeah, it's cool and exciting, but you need to have a story that's going to back that up, and it's going to engage you, and it's going to want you to continue to keep playing and not just randomly walking around smashing X person into Y wall, or cutting, this person, or drowning that person. It can't just be that the entire game. It just can't. There's not going to be any appeal to want to keep playing. That's a game where you're going to sit around, play it for maybe about an hour, say, yeah, you know what, this is really cool, but I'm done.
Well, and that's the same thing with the rise and fall of the Lord of the Rings game, Shadows of Mordor, is that it was fantastic gameplay, really pretty good graphics. I mean, considering it was a really, really fun game to play, but only to a point, because it basically was what it was. The story did not carry it. You didn't really get that many new abilities to really make you more interested in continuously playing and building up your character. It was just, okay, this is the story, now go. And then the story never really progressed further.
Yeah.
And that's what made... And I've never finished that game. I want to, because at the same time, I love the game, but at the same time, it's very much like this Friday the 13th game, where, to me, it seems like there's a story, and then all of a sudden, it's just, okay, go out and do your own thing, until the very last part of the game, where you get to know the second part of the story. There's no middle stories. It's just the beginning, you play the game, you see the ending credits, there's the game right there.
Yeah. See, what I almost feel like Friday the 13th could really benefit from as a series, I almost feel like I'd rather, if I was given the choice between the two, let's say in a world called Perfect, you were given the choice. Here's a Friday the 13th game where you get to walk around, you get to play as Jason, or here's Telltale's next installment of the Friday the 13th series where it's told in a story fashion. Given the choice between the two, I would probably go with like a Telltale version of the game where it at least adds a little bit more excitement, because, there's the potential that you could make the right or wrong move that's going to result in you escaping or getting completely brutally murdered.
Right, and if I'm being honest, Telltale has not really made a bad story. I mean, if you go back, just for Back to the Future was a great sequel. It had a really fantastic story, its own original story to Back to the Future, but it was also reminiscent to the original trilogy. And this basically was a sequel to the trilogy. It was like 5 episodes, but it felt like 3 mini movies to me, and got to just interact with it and really be a part of it. And it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic story. And Telltale, I think, really is able to take someone else's concept and run with it and make a story based off of that. Like, again, I talk about the Jurassic Park video game. They did a fantastic job with that, where like this whole story takes place during the first Jurassic Park game while everybody else is doing stuff. There are other people on the island, and this is what's happening with them while the main characters are running around with their heads cut off. No pun intended. You know what I mean? Telltale just has that, and I think this would be a great franchise for them to pick up. I would love to see them do some Friday the 13th. I mean, they did really well with Walking Dead. Why couldn't they do something with Jason? I'd love to see that happen, and I think that people that really enjoy the stories with Jason and Friday the 13th franchise would just love to see Telltale pick up a story like that, whether it's even maybe not Jason, but maybe Halloween or something like that. So I completely agree.
And another series that would equally benefit from a good Telltale title would be Nightmare on Elm Street. How much fun would that be?
People have talked about, I forget, there was an interview with somebody that was one of the creators of one of these movie franchises, like the Halloween classic movie franchises, and he said, what would be your ideal story if you could do something? And he said, I would love to have Nightmare on Elm Street meet Chucky.
Yep.
And where they just meet up and they say, let's see who can kill the most people. So Chucky's outside killing people, and this other guy is just going in and killing people in their dreams and this and that. And he said that would be just a great, I would love to see, I mean, I'm not into horror, but I would love to see, I would probably get into these series just to see a crossover between some of these really classic Halloween slasher movie characters and see them interact with each other. You know what I mean?
Completely agree. I've actually even thought of a movie where it should be set in a world where every single one of these horror icons exist, and these group of people just constantly run into it. There's no surviving the night or the day for that matter, because you have to worry about all the horrors of the people who come out while you're awake. But now you have no refuge because Freddy is the master of nightmares. So there's just like you can't sleep, but then again, you can't stay awake because somebody's going to get you somewhere. I think that would be a hilarious game, some type of a, or not even necessarily a game, maybe even a movie, some type of a crossover between all of those horror characters in one setting.
I wouldn't put it past somebody to eventually do that. I mean, people have been wanting that kind of stuff for years, but I mean, if you think about it, it's not like they haven't done that with the classic horror people, like the Mummy and Dracula and the werewolf getting together in many, many different movies, you know, with Van Helsing being like the hero of the story, going and trying to get the werewolf and Dracula and the Mummy and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and the zombies or whatever else they want to just add into those movies. They have films like that. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually they decided to make a film with these classic characters as they get to either team up or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yep. I mean, just look at movies like Freddy versus Jason or Predator versus Aliens. The battles are there. There is a need for it, and there are film writers and screenwriters out there who want to pursue it. I just want to see more of them, but more so, more of them done well.
Yep. Yeah, you can't throw them together. And there have been ones that have been thrown together. I mean, think of Superman and Batman.
Yeah,
People
perfect
have been wanting
example.
that for years, and what happened?
We got a home result. Yep.
Well, I think that's all we had for Friday the 13th. You think we should move on?
Moving on.
All right. So we have 3 more games to talk about from E3. These are the really, really important ones that are going to be coming up for the next episode. We hope that you enjoy them next week. We conclude today's podcast with a few reminders. If you have any comments or questions, shoot us an email at geekweekly@chadanmfilms.com. Please consider following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The links are provided below. Don't forget to like, share, laugh, and most importantly, love. From all of us at Geek Weekly, thanks for listening. This has been a Chadanm Films production.